back to another episode of Sloppy Saturdays. And today we are going over our week one storylines. Week one was absolutely insane. Week one really proved that none of us know anything with the amount of crazy things that happened that pretty much nobody in the country could have expected. The one thing I do have to say about the week one main matchups is that the public got absolutely destroyed. So that proves again that really nobody knows anything because pretty much every non-public team won besides South Carolina spread. So out of all these games, the public really lost. But we're going to go into all the main week one matchups and go over certain storylines of the matchup more than like play by play of each game. Now, when you guys usually saw me last year, I was going over every single game of each slate because the slates weren't really as juiced as it was week one. Like we've said it time and time again, I have never seen a week one slate this juiced when you look at multiple top 10 matchups. So I want to go over every game, primarily storylines, what I think of a lot of these surprises, and my takeaways from everything. So let's get right into it. The first game we got to go to, obviously, we're going in chronological order as well. We are going in Texas, Ohio State. Now, boy, is there a lot to say about this game. The first thing everybody wants to know is what are my thoughts on Arch Manning coming into today? If anybody watches me, I had him as the second best quarterback in college football. Now, the first thing I have to say that really bugs me is there are people like mainstream media analysts. I'm not going to name drop anybody. As well as people in the public that had Arch Manning as the number one quarterback going into the country, had Arch Manning as his generational talent. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I wasn't high on Arch Manning. I still am high on Arch Manning. So that should tell you a little bit. But there are people that had him as the number one quarterback in the country, one of the best college football quarterbacks we have seen in the last 10 years. And then after this game against Ohio State, they're all the way out. I don't understand how anybody does that. If anybody knows me, I'm kind of a ride or die with my takes. I ride it pretty much until the wheels fall off. I'm not a guy that lets one game really dictate my whole opinion on a player or a take. So for Arch Manning, there was no doubt that this game went pretty much horrible for him. When you look at 17 for 30, 170 yards, a touchdown, and interception, very well could have been 2 interceptions. He did not play great at all. But when you look at what he was brought into, he's playing the national champions on the road as his first true start taking over this team. That's pretty rough. Like, he couldn't get put in a more rough situation. And again, did he play as bad as he could possibly play? Yeah. If Texas would have lost, 24-27, he would have put in 3 touchdowns. We wouldn't be coming in here and really hesitated on clicking the panic button, but he played really bad. Now, did I think Steve Sarkisian do a great job scheming up plays for him? No, that has been a main talk of conversation after this game as well. I did not think Steve Sarkisian really put him in the best place. I thought Steve Sarkisian definitely got out-coached. But for Arch Manning, again, you could really only blame or give majority to blame to Arch Manning because there was a handful of throws that were very easy throws that he was just flat out missing. Now, was nerves getting to him? Maybe. But again, like I said, you are playing the national champions on the road as your first true start with all this hype building up. And you are facing Matt Patricia, a former NFL defensive coordinator and head coach that's giving you very exotic defensive schemes to go against, which is going to be super tough for a guy like Arch Manning to read in his first true start. So everything combined definitely set up Arch Manning to not exceed the expectations he had on him. And the other thing I do have to say about Arch Manning as well, very similar to when Trevor Lawrence was going into the pros and he's not doing as great as expected. There are so many people, and it's a media problem really, that hype people up through the roof before they really seen enough. And these guys never basically live up to expectations because the expectations are so ridiculously high for them. Now, for Arch Manning, I'm going to say it. I'm not hitting the panic button on Arch Manning, and I'm not hitting the panic button on Texas at all. If you are a Texas Longhorns fan, I would not be hitting the panic button. I think your defense probably played the best defense out of anybody in the country in week one, probably outside of LSU. When you look at Ohio State scoring 14 points on this defense, not only that, having 200 yards of total offense against this defense, I don't know if any defense in the country could have held Ohio State to 200 yards. I do not think so. The defensive side of the ball, you could be looking at the best defense in the country in the Texas Longhorns. So that's why I wouldn't panic on them again. And I think Arch Manning is still going to be fine. Like, in my opinion, at the end of the year, I would still be surprised if Arch Manning doesn't fall into top 5 quarterback in the country. Like, I still am very high on Arch Manning. And again, for the Texas Longhorns, who they have to play next, they do have 2 or 3 weeks of cupcakes before they get into main matchups again. And this is why I said to you guys time and time again, and we're going to talk about it with Julian Sain and the Ohio State Buckeyes, I think cupcakes are so huge in week 1 or week 2 for any quarterbacks, like the first 2 weeks coming in, playing easy opponents. Because in college football, you do not get enough full speed reps in the offseason. It isn't like the NFL where there's a preseason where you could play full speed reps or you're playing against other teams in practices. Like, it does not work out that way. So I think especially for 2 first-time starters holding a team like Arch Manning and like Julian Sain, this is a very tough matchup to go into against, 2 of the best defense in the country for each quarterback, not really having the starts or throws under their belt. So again, I think you should not panic on really either of these teams. And I think if you're an Ohio State fan, I think you should be really pleased at the outcome. Again, you are facing probably the toughest out-of-conference matchup you could have faced on week 1. And to get this win out of the way definitely leaves you room in the schedule. Again, Ohio State was a team that's going to be a shoo-in for the college football playoffs regardless, but definitely takes a lot of pressure off beating an out-of-conference SEC matchup, a top team in the SEC week 1. And I really like what I saw out of Julian Sain. Again, it reminds me of like a system quarterback. No mistakes, no turnovers. He did enough to win this game. When you look, C.J. Donaldson put in a touchdown, and then Carnell Tate, finally one of these receivers opened up and scored a touchdown. That was ridiculous defense for Texas as well. That was a spectacular catch by Carnell Tate. And to get this first win out of the way against the number 1 team in the country going into the season with Julian Sain, who definitely had question marks. Now a guy like Julian Sain, after being 1-0 against one of the toughest teams you could face, has time to really ease into the college football season. So I have no really worries for Ohio State. Like, they held Texas to 7. The defense looked absolutely phenomenal. And what you have on offense with Julian Sain doing enough to get this win, I think the offense is definitely going to come along with these 2 receivers. The other thing I have to say that was very impressive for Texas as well, and we said it going into this matchup, how they were able to cover Jeremiah Smith. We saw last year they were the best team in the country that was able to cover Jeremiah Smith and limit him. And they limited him again. When you look at 6 receptions for 43 yards, definitely not a Jeremiah Smith day. And Jeremiah Smith, in my opinion, looked a little flustered in the beginning of this game as well. We saw him miss 2 easy passes. So Texas did a great job scheming that up. And I thought Carnell Tate was really going to eat even more. I mean, he was the one that broke this tie. Definitely set Ohio State above Texas with that touchdown. But again, I expected him to eat even more. I think Texas, again, the defense is going to be phenomenal. I believe he's going to be one of the best in the country. And I think Arch Manning will come along. I'm really not worried about Arch Manning or Texas. Like, again, I think both these teams are going to be shoo-ins for the college football playoffs. I think for both offenses, it was a super tough task for week 1 with both of these starters. And like I said, I do not like the way Steve Sark really drew up plays for Arch Manning. But again, I feel like he drew up the plays like Arch Manning was a veteran, which again, with all the hype coming in and the talent of Arch Manning, they treated him like he was a starter that started for 2 years already. But again, he was just unprepared for this game. It was a very, very tough matchup for him. Obviously, the talent of Ohio State, they'll be national champions. But I think the biggest thing was Matt Patricia and what he was able to do on the defensive side of the ball with these exotic coverages. Arch Manning walked into probably the toughest task that he could possibly walk into. But I really have no worries for either of these teams. I think Arch Manning at the end of this college football season is still going to be a top 5 quarterback in the country. And I think people are just hitting the panic button way too early. And for Ohio State, again, they're going to be almost right where they were last year. Like, they're going to be in national championship contention, possibly in the national championship. Like, the defense looked absolutely insane. Obviously, the offense isn't where you want it to be, having 200 yards and scoring 2 touchdowns. But again, Julian Sain did enough to win this game. Yeah, that wraps up that game. I am not panicking on Arch Manning, definitely like other people are. Because I can't. I thought Arch Manning is gonna be this great talent, and I still think he's gonna be this great talent with the pedigree he has. I do think he has the talent to do so. He did make two great passes at the end of the game, the touchdown pass and the pass on the sideline to the tight ends. Like we did see some good things out of him at least, but again, like I said, definitely stuff to worry about as well. But I think Texas will be fine, and I think Ohio State is in a great spot. Now we're getting into a team that definitely is not in a great spot, that I was just flat out wrong on. We are going with Alabama, Florida State. This was the biggest upset of the weekend. Florida State ends up winning 31-17 as a 13-point underdog. This was a complete shock. Now, getting into Florida State, the one thing for Alabama, even in the Saban era, Alabama has always had trouble containing mobile quarterbacks, and Thomas Castellanos absolutely gave them fits. When you look at what he was able to do rushing, he did have 16 carries in this game for 78 yards and a touchdown, and he was super efficient in the passing game as well, 9 for 14 with 152 yards. He absolutely gave them fits, and I'm going to have my hand up. If you look back, I have a video saying, what is Thomas Castellanos doing, calling out Alabama, saying he doesn't think that they could cover him without Saban. Saban isn't there anymore. And again, he called the shot, and he was 100% right. Florida State was pretty much in full control this whole entire game. Towards the end, it did get a little close, but from start to finish, Florida State really put it on Alabama. And they looked like a team that was just a lot more hungrier than Alabama. And we also look at them on the defensive side of the ball as well. They were getting to Ty Simpson at an insane clip. We talked about 1 for 10 Ty Simpson incompletions against QB pressures. So Ty Simpson, again, didn't look the best as well. He ends up throwing 43 times, 23 for 43, 254 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jeremy Bernard had a phenomenal game. Jeremy Bernard was a player that I did like. 8 receptions for 146 yards. He was eating out there. Ryan Williams was pretty much contained. He was injured towards the end of the game as well. 5 receptions for 30 yards. But Jeremy Bernard might be eating because, again, the coverages on Ryan Williams. Like I said, Florida State looked absolutely phenomenal on both sides of the ball. But again, I'm going to temper my expectations. Do I think Florida State could be a winning team in college football? Yeah, 100%. I like Mike Norvell. I thought he had one of the most impressive seasons ever with that Jordan Travis team. And again, last year was a disappointment. Obviously, a 2-win team that I thought had talent. Again, you could debate that with DJU, whatever you're on that side of that quarterback. But again, you're looking at a team with a ton of overhaul. And that's why I was on Alabama in this game, because I like cohesive teams. And this team, I mean, they had to make a lot of changes, obviously, as a 2-win team, but they did get talent. I mean, we saw Thomas Castellanos last year. He is a talented quarterback. And again, a dual threat quarterback in college football could give any defense problems. And we saw Alabama had absolutely no answers for this offense. Now, what I do have to say about Alabama, I am clicking the panic button on Alabama. I thought Alabama was going to be a lot better this year. I thought they were going to be the most hungriest team in college football just because, all the talk around Kalen DeBoer. And Alabama obviously not making a 12-team playoff last year when they were a shoo-in for a 14 playoff. But things are a lot different now for Alabama. Does it have to do with Saban leaving? Yeah, 100%. I think it definitely is more towards the NIL transfer portal, the more even playing field in college football. I don't agree with the people saying that this Alabama team doesn't have Alabama-type players. I 100% think they do. I think they have super talented players on this team. When you look at Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, Justin Jefferson, Deontay Lawson, LT Overton, those are Alabama players. Those are Alabama starters in any Alabama year pretty much. I think the difference is now with the transfer portal and NIL, they don't have that clear advantage in matchups. Yeah, they have Alabama-type players, like we mentioned, but they don't have the depth that they used to have. They don't have wide receivers that are 6 NFL wide receivers deep on a roster. They don't have a running back room that are three NFL running backs deep on a roster. Secondary, where you have 9 players that are NFL players, NFL future players. That is not the case anymore. Yeah, they have some NFL players on this team, but they don't have the depth like they used to do. They don't have a wide receiver core that's like Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith. They do not have that anymore. And again, is Ty Simpson an Alabama quarterback? I mean, we've seen players in the Nick Saban era, like an A.J. McCarron and others that aren't necessarily huge NFL guys. But this Alabama team does not have the depth to scare you anymore. And obviously, teams aren't as scared anymore either without Nick Saban. Again, do I think if Nick Saban was coaching his team that this stuff would have happened? I still do not think so. And I think Kalen DeBoer is 100% on the hot seat. And I said it coming into this year, even though I was high on Alabama, I think if they don't make the college football playoffs, Kalen DeBoer is going to be on a tremendous hot seat and can be fired. And now that's what everybody's talking about now, which I think should be a topic of conversation. Now, the thing I did want to discuss that I don't know if I discussed this season, NIL is basically making it impossible, nearly impossible, to fire coaches with these big contracts. And Kalen DeBoer has a bigger buyout than anybody in the country when you look at a $70 million buyout. So it is going to be a difficult season for Alabama. But if this Alabama team doesn't meet expectations, if they are in a top 15 team in the country, if they don't make a 12-team college football playoffs, they are going to have to do something. They're going to have to do something. Again, it makes it very tough at NIL transfer portal era now to buy out a $70 million coach because you want to use all your money on players. I mean, we've seen it. We're going to get into the Bill Belichick game. We've seen it with a ton of coaches. No matter what coach you have, players make plays, especially in college football. And you want to use the money on the players now that that's a reality. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they do with Kalen DeBoer. But Alabama, in my opinion, we have to hit the panic button on them. This was a game as a 13-point favorite that we expected them to ease through. They didn't. They have a tough SEC schedule, and they can only afford like another loss or two in their tough schedule. I have to lose into what was supposed to be a very easy matchup for them. A loss you can't afford in the SEC as a 13-point favorite. And now this is 4 times in the Kalen DeBoer era where Alabama lost to an unranked team. I don't think Nick Saban lost 4 times to an unranked team in his entire college football coaching career. So, again, Kalen DeBoer is 100% on the hot seat. Alabama made a complete turn in this new era to a team that nobody comes in and fears anymore. And again, does it have a lot of things going into it? Yes, like I said, they aren't able to have the depth of talent they had. They were competing with one or two other teams for recruits back in the day. Now they're with NIL, transfer portal, and everything. They're competing with almost every team in the country. And again, having Kalen DeBoer as a coach, having Nick Saban as a coach, big difference. I'm very surprised how bad things have been for Kalen DeBoer again. I had high hopes for him getting that job, but wow, Alabama's on a true hot seat. And if they don't figure things out fast, I still think Kalen DeBoer could be gone. Even with a $70 million buyout, again, will they lean to maybe one more season of Kalen DeBoer just because that buyout's so strong? Maybe, but again, 2 times not making a 12-team college football playoff with how disappointing Alabama's been. There are questions in Tuscaloosa for sure, like 100%. All right, wow. I'm almost out of breath here, and we're not even into the third game. We're going to get into this third game, and this third game really said a lot for me. We are going with LSU Clemson. LSU wins this game 17-10. And again, another example of these low-scoring games, like I said, these offenses not getting full-speed reps. I think 100% goes into these low-scoring games. But I am shocked at LSU. Now, I'm not shocked that LSU win this game, but I'm shocked the way they won this game. I had questions with LSU's defense. I thought their offense was arguably the most talented offense in college football, but I had reservations on their defense. Just because the last 2 years of LSU defenses have been super rough. When we look at LSU defenses the last 2 years ago when they had Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., and they were putting up like 40, 50 points a game and still couldn't make the college football playoffs because their defense was just letting up 30, 40 points a night as well. That had trouble for me. And then last year, again, I feel like they also didn't make the college football playoffs because their defense wasn't an above-average defense in the SEC as well. So I had questions coming in for LSU's defense. And this is what really shocked me and why we might have to really look at LSU as a national championship favorite team, because this defense absolutely closed out against Clemson. They looked phenomenal. This defense was flying. Now, when I went over this LSU defense all off season, I have told you guys they have 2 stars on this defense. When we look at Harold Perkins, like two guys that are able to close out like nobody else in the country. They are two stars in its defense. But when you look at the receiving core that Clemson has, arguably the best receiving core in the country, when you look at Brian Resco Jr., TJ Moore, and Tony Williams, absolutely locking up this Clemson receiving core. Like, again, they still had 230 yards of receiving, but again, limited them to 10 points. And the way they were able to scheme up against Cade Klubnik, like on major downs in this game, when we look at third, fourth downs, gotta have it type of downs, they got to the quarterback. They closed out on Cade Klubnik, and on multiple third and fourth downs in the second half, Cade Klubnik had absolutely nowhere to go early, absolutely no time. They were getting to him, especially to a above average offensive line in Clemson, and an offense, like I said, that is absolutely insane in Clemson with depth. Now, the one question I did have about Clemson all off season, the only weakness I believe this team had was their run game. I didn't know what they were going to do in their run game. They didn't really do much in the transfer portal to help the run game, and we saw it. They had 31 yards. Now, I thought they were going to go to Gideon Davidson, but he didn't really get any carries in this game, and they couldn't get anything going in the run game. And I think that was the biggest difference as well. LSU had 108 yards rushing to Clemson's 31. Again, 108-yard rushing, not really like a phenomenal rushing total, but that's a big difference. That's 70 rushing yards. And if Clemson's going to be a team that's not going to be able to run the ball, they're going to be in some trouble, because you have to have a run game to win a national championship for sure, as both these teams are national championship contenders. Now, for Clemson, people were saying that they don't have a LSU-style receiver, but I think collectively on this LSU receiver room, I think they have a lot of talent. Aaron Anderson, I thought, was the guy that was making huge plays after the catch in this game. He had 6 receptions for 99 yards. I like the burst he has. I mean, they have a track team. Barry Brown as well. He has elite speed. Again, you didn't really see much of it in this game, but I thought he's a guy with a lot of talent. We obviously talked about Nick Anderson all off season. He didn't do anything in this game, but another guy that makes his receiving room deep. This receiving room could go 5 guys deep. Caden Durham was the difference, I believe, in this game. Like I said, he was able to run the football. Clemson wasn't. He had 17 carries for 74 yards and a touchdown. A guy that I believe could be one of the best running backs in the country for sure. A guy that I thought was one of the best freshmen for sure. And I thought Garrett Nussmeier looked pretty good. Again, there wasn't really a quarterback that I was really insanely high on in this college football slate week 1 on their performance, was what I wanted to say, out of like the top Heisman favorite. But I thought Garrett Nussmeier played really well. I mean, we saw at half 10-3, he couldn't really get anything going. And then he did enough to win this football game for sure. He could have had another touchdown. Again, that's the thing we got to talk about with this LSU game, the touchdown that got called back. And it was a very similar touchdown in the South Carolina game that we'll get into very shortly as well. What I wanted to say is, like, the standard for a catch now is so high. Like, you have to have it all the way to the ground. And we saw the call got reversed. And I don't mind it in both scenarios in this game in South Carolina. Like, you really got to survive the ground. The standards for a catch are high. And I believe both receivers didn't survive the ground. But, again, Garrett Nussmeier did enough to win in the second half. He put in 2 touchdowns. And I think the biggest thing, like I said, for this LSU team, I didn't expect this defense to be an elite defense. And after week 1, I said I don't like to overreact, but they did it against one of the best offenses in the country, absolutely shut them down to 10 points, closed them out. Like, if this LSU defense is elite with how great their offense is, they could be the most balanced team in college football. They could be the team with the most talent in college football. Like, I am completely shocked. And that's the one take in this week 1 that I am really willing to change my perspective on. Like, LSU could really be a problem in college football. If this defense is going to fly like this all year with the offense they have, they're going to be an absolute problem. And they could be, again, halfway through the season, the favorite to win the national championship. This LSU team has a ton of talent. Now, I'm not super high on Brian Kelly, again, over the years, but I wasn't super high on Ryan Day either. He won a national championship last year. Like, sometimes just talent outweighs, and this LSU team has a ton of talent. Now, when you talk about this LSU-Clemson matchup, who really needed this win more? No doubt it was LSU. We were saying it in a lot of our previews. Like, if LSU doesn't come away with this out-of-conference win in week 1, it could be very tough for them with a tough SEC schedule. And again, for the teams in the SEC, like a Texas, like an LSU, that played the toughest possible out-of-conference matchup you could play and then got to go into an SEC schedule, it is huge to have a week 1 win. So LSU definitely need this more. Clemson in the ACC, like, they're going to be a heavy favorite in almost every matchup. I'm not worried about Clemson making the college football playoffs. Again, they could really win out, in my opinion. Like, the next toughest matchup they play is South Carolina in the last week. So, again, I'm not too worried about Clemson. I'm not hitting the panic button on Clemson. But for Clemson to be a national championship contender, you got to be able to run the ball. So they got to find something in this running game throughout these next 9 or 10 weeks before they play South Carolina, in my opinion. That's the biggest thing for me with Clemson. But am I worried about Kate Klubnik? No, not really. Am I worried about this receiving core? Definitely not. Worried about this defense? I'm not worried about this defense either. Again, they were playing a top offense, and at the end of the day, they held them to 17 points. So, again, I do definitely think Clemson is one of the best teams in the country, and I do think Clemson is in a really good spot with their ACC schedule. Just the running game is just really only have worries for Clemson. And then for LSU, like, their ceiling could be absolutely through the roof because, again, if I expect LSU to win this game going into this game, I thought it was going to be in shootout fashion. I did not think it was going to be this LSU defense flying around. This LSU defense could be one of the best LSU defenses we've seen in the last, like, 4 or 5 years. So, wow. Like, LSU. If you're an LSU fan after this game, you got to be extremely, extremely high on what you saw. Like, LSU, we may have to rethink some things, podcast. We may really have to rethink some things with this LSU team because I'm super stoked what I saw from LSU. Now when we get into Virginia, South Carolina, this was a little bit of a weird matchup. Again, this was the only matchup where the public really won. I don't have too many thoughts in this game because, again, I expected South Carolina to really run through Virginia Tech. I don't expect Virginia Tech to be a contender in any sort. South Carolina won 24-11. Now, they were able to get 125 rushing yards on the ground. And I think it's just a product of Lenore Sellers' threat in the RPO game. Lenore Sellers, I thought he looked pretty good. I really did think he looked pretty good. Now, when we look at polarizing skill sets, like I said time and time again, he has the most polarizing skill set in the country. We saw the plays that he was able to make in this game. No other quarterback in the country could make. He looked like a guy he looked like Cam Newton almost, where he was bringing off 2-3 defenders off of him and able to run for first down. There was just times where he looked like a man playing against boys in the run game. Now, we had a rusher touchdown as well. South Carolina came into this game super, super hot. Like, they were perfect passing, 50 yards, and Lenore Sellers ran in a touchdown on that first drive. So they definitely came in and made a statement. And then really, both teams were really stalling out. I mean, we saw Virginia Tech at a safety. That's another example where, again, Lenore Sellers is going to have to grow in his decision-making. He did take a couple of sacks that I didn't like, a couple of incompletions that I thought he could have wished he had back. So, again, Lenore Sellers' skill set is absolutely phenomenal, and he definitely is a guy that's in the running for Heisman. But, again, I'm not willing to say that he had a outstanding game, way more than my expectations. But, again, he made some plays that nobody else can make. And then also, again, he did have a little bit of botched plays, but they were able to get the win. Kyron Drones, 2 interceptions. His decision-making was pretty bad. Now, the one thing I do have to say about South Carolina is they have just physical freaks. They have guys that could be the best guys in the SEC. When you look at Lenore Sellers, again, like we said, nobody has a skill set with his size, his ability to run the football, and his arm talent. But, again, Nick Harbor's the same type of thing. When we look at Nick Harbor, we're talking about a 4-time Gatorade Player of the Year, which is unheard of. Again, 2 in track and field and 2 in football. But when we look at this guy at 6'5", at his weight and his speed, like, again, he could be the most talented receiver in the country outside of, like, a Jeremiah Smith. But Nick Harbor, the reason why I didn't have him in my top 5 receivers in the country is because I just wanted to see more. Like, he had 300 yards last year. But, again, we definitely saw it out of him. 3 receptions, 99 yards, and a touchdown. I believe, like, when he scored that touchdown, that just got to a point where South Carolina was just absolutely bullying Virginia Tech. Like, enough is enough in that fourth quarter after that game was so close for 2 quarters. So, again, Nick Harper's a physical freak. And then Dylan Stewart, like, absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. He could be the best edge rusher in college football. He's a physical freak. He's a guy that I have no doubt when it's his time to go into the NFL, he's going to be an absolute game changer. Again, you're looking at the best edge rusher in college football. That's a physical freak, possibly. You're looking at a guy that has as much talent as a receiver to be a top 3 to 5 receiver in the country. And you're looking at Lenore Sellers, who has the talent of everybody. Like, This team has physical freaks. Another thing I wanted to say, what a call by South Carolina to reroute that kick and to bring in that kick return for a touchdown. That was an absolutely insane play as well. If anybody knows what I'm talking about there. I wish South Carolina would have blew him out a little more. I wish I would have saw, a little more consistency from Lenore Sellers after, the safety, the couple of incompletions. Like, I wish this game wasn't so tight for so long. But again, South Carolina is definitely a team to watch out for. I want to see them play opponents in the SEC and see how they fare out. But I like how they look in this game. I think, again, like I said, they have three guys that could be at the top of the SEC. And Lenore Sellers, again, one of the quarterbacks in the Heisman race that actually did play well. So, again, South Carolina, definitely like what I saw there. Now we get into Miami, Notre Dame. Now, Miami, Notre Dame, this was the best game on the slate, in my opinion. This game ended 27-24. We got scoring. We got dramatics. Now, the first thing I want to say for Miami, I think if you're a Miami fan, very similar to LSU, getting this first win off the schedule out of conference, again, one of the toughest out of conference teams you could possibly play, and what might be the toughest defense you might play all season. This win was absolutely phenomenal, especially for a Miami team last year that shouldn't have missed the college football playoffs. To get the best opponent out of the way and come out with a win, this is absolutely huge in an ACC schedule. Now, Miami does play some pretty tough opponents. Like, they have 4 tough matchups. They play both Florida teams in Florida State and Florida. They also play Pitt. They play like a couple teams. I think they play SMU as well. So they do have some tough matchups. But getting this matchup out of its way and coming out with a win, I think is phenomenal. When you look at this offense, we did have question marks. Now, they were able to use a variety of different running backs. They had 127 yards rushing, which I thought was pretty good. I think Mark Fletcher is really going to be a very talented running back in college football, one of the best ACC running backs. But I want to talk about Carson Beck. I thought Carson Beck looked really good. And again, Carson Beck, if anybody has been watching me for the last, year and a half, Carson Beck is a guy that I have always been high on. Carson Beck was a guy that I thought was absolutely scapegoated with Georgia. Like, they blamed it on him, but I didn't think he had the receiving talent at all at Georgia. And another guy, when we talk about expectations just being flat out too high, yes, did I have him as the number 1 quarterback in college football? Yeah. Did I have him as the number 1 pick in the draft? Yeah. But when we looked at what he was going into with Georgia and the receiving core he had, he was not really put in a spot to succeed, and he still led them to an SEC championship. So, again, I don't know what people were really looking at. His stats were good last year. Georgia won the SEC championship. I don't think that season was a disappointment. I think Miami had one of the best moves grabbing him in the transfer portal, and I thought he had a great game. Malachi Tony and TJ Daniels both looked really good as well. TJ Daniels, a guy that had 1,000 yards and 10-plus touchdowns at Louisville. So he's a guy with talent. And then he went to LSU, and he was just buried kind of in the depth chart. He did have 400 yards last season. Malachi Tony is a guy that really came out of nowhere. Again, we're talking about a 3-star. We're talking about a 3-star freshman, and he came out of nowhere. He looked really good as well. That's the one thing I do have to say. This Miami team, with the turnover they had on offense, to have the receiving room look really as good as it did, like, that's something I would definitely hang my hat on, because I was unsure who Carson Beck's receivers were really going to be that were going to stand out. Because, again, like I said, with the receiving core he had last year, with the most drops in the country, I was nervous about that. With the turnover they had, losing again, Damian Martinez, Xavier Restrepo, Elijah Arroyo, Cam Moore. Like, this is a whole new offense, but I think they did a great job. I think this offense is not going to be a question mark. This offense is going to be one of the best offenses in college football. They look really good. The only one concern I had for Miami in this game was the coaching of Mario Cristobal. Yes, it did lead to a win for sure, but I don't like how this Miami team played the game down the stretch. When they were up, it really looked like they were just running clock, trying to run clock. And what Carson Beck was doing passing the ball is what was able to get them this lead. Then it looked like they were just trying to run out the game the whole entire fourth quarter, which I didn't like. They were getting numerous 3-and-outs, 4 straight stops for Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was allowed to come back in that game, and it made it very close. I like a team that really sticks to what got them leading in the game almost the whole way through. Again, if it's a situation where there's 2 minutes left and you have the lead and you want to run the ball, sure, 100%. But don't start running clock in the fourth quarter. I didn't like that. I thought Carson Beck was on fire. I thought his team just had a ton of momentum, and they let Notre Dame get the momentum back. Now, again, the only throw I actually didn't like from Carson Beck was probably the best play of the game in CJ Daniels. I thought that was a bad decision from Carson Beck. CJ Daniels made a phenomenal play on that ball. that ball, best case scenario, was going to be batted down, but I thought it looked like a pick. He came up against 3 Notre Dame defenders, had a one-handed catch. That was phenomenal. But again, they let Notre Dame get back in this game, which I did not like at all. For Notre Dame, I have a little bit of question marks for Notre Dame. First off, why was Jeremiah Love not used the way he was used? Me liking Notre Dame in this game was because I thought Notre Dame had the best player on the entire field in Jeremiah Love, and he was just flat out not used. I do not know why. I did like Notre Dame's coaching, though, and how they were using TJ Carr. Again, getting him in rhythm, I think, was the biggest thing with the ton of screens we saw. I mean, they were spamming wide receiver screen. That led to an interception later in the game because they were just using that way too much. Again, that was a pivotal point. But I thought TJ Carr looked really good for his first start. I mean, we're looking at 19 for 30, 221 yards, 2 touchdowns. Obviously, like we said, the pick that I really think was on him. I thought that was a play calling issue. But TJ Carr, first of all, his legs, they were able to use him like Riley Leonard was used last year, which I was not expecting at all. I did not expect TJ Carr to be that runner, which I really liked. And again, we talked about this Notre Dame team coming back. TJ Carr was poised, and he was able to really show as a true threat throwing the ball. So, again, I absolutely love what I saw out of TJ Carr in a tough week 1 matchup. Even though Notre Dame lost, I thought they were going to lose, and Jeremiah Love really taking hold of this offense if they were going to lose. And they lost basically on the backs of TJ Carr. I thought TJ Carr played really good again. When he got the ball back in the last minute, he was just set up for failure. I mean, they were just all-out blitz in Miami. He didn't have the protection. And again, 1 throw in the middle of the field or 1 sack, it was completely over. And that's really what happened. But I'm pretty impressed with TJ Carr. I think TJ Carr, again, by the end of this year, could be a better quarterback than Riley Leonard was. And I was high on Riley Leonard just because I did not think TJ Carr was going to be able to run the football like he was able to. When we look at TJ Carr, it was multiple design runs for him in Riley Leonard fashion, which I thought wasn't a possibility. And throwing the ball, I think he looked a lot better than Riley Leonard. I mean, we saw, 9, 10 Notre Dame games where Riley Leonard had 100 yards passing, 100-plus yards passing. Like, I thought TJ Carr did look really good. I thought one of the touchdown passes he made when he was rolling out was absolutely phenomenal as well with his poise. Again, if I was both of these teams, I would be very pleased about what I saw. Again, if you're a Notre Dame fan and you received a loss, again, you're not completely happy, but I think you could look at TJ Carr and say they made the right decision at quarterback for sure. And if you're Miami, you got to be absolutely stoked about what happened in this game. But again, who need this win more? Definitely Miami in this tough matchup. Again, with question marks getting into the college football playoffs, with question marks of them being the best team in the ACC. You get the toughest opponent out of the way, absolutely huge, and you show your offense could score with anybody as you're scoring as against one of the best defense in the country. And again, if you're Notre Dame, TJ Carr could do things that I don't know that was at the quarterback position last year. So, again, I wouldn't be too down if I was a Notre Dame fan, and I would be very, very high if I was I'm just trying to get the next name up. If I was a Miami fan, like, you got the best opponent out of your way, and that's absolutely huge in these week 1 matchups because we never really saw that as the case in week 1 where multiple top 10 teams are playing their toughest matchup in week 1. But again, they went all out in college football week 1, and a lot of these teams took advantage. Now the last game we were going over, this was honestly the one game out of every game that I am talking about that went exactly how I thought it was going to go. TCU, North Carolina. TCU put BTA against North Carolina. Like, they got absolutely dogged. North Carolina got absolutely destroyed, and that's exactly how I thought it was going to go. Again, public was for North Carolina. Again, if you're a casual, you're watching this, you're just riding with Bill Belichick blindly. But what TCU had returning, TCU had a cohesiveness. Not only that, TCU was overlooked last season. They were a 9-4 team. Even us as a podcast overlooked them. Like, they were pretty good last year. They had all the talent returning. This North Carolina team had 70 incoming players. But not only that, you see a turnover with a team that brought in talent, like a team like Florida State. That was not the case with North Carolina. We had said it to you guys in our North Carolina preview. Like, you could go back. This North Carolina team did not have the talent, I think, to be really a winning team in college football. Again, in the ACC, maybe a game over 500 they could have been. But, again, they just didn't have the talent. And you can't make chicken salad out of chicken, you know what. So that's basically what happened in this game. Like, no matter who you have at coach, if the playing field is not close to even, again, like I said, players make plays. And I think the books on every aspect are just giving Bill Belichick way too much credit. Like you're just buying into Bill Belichick way too much. And again, is he going to be a top coach in the country? I'm not sure. Against people who have been coaching college football for 5, 10+ years, Bill Belichick hasn't been doing that. And this roster, again, is just not there. And we saw it. Like, I thought Josh Hoover really played phenomenal. 27 for 36, 284 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have a pick in this game. The pick wasn't that screen pass. Again, was it the best decision? No. But that pick was a phenomenal pick. But outside of that, I thought Josh Hoover looked absolutely phenomenal. I thought what he was able to do, rolling out, keeping his composure, looking upfield. He did it on a touchdown pass that I thought was a phenomenal pass. And not only that, there was another pass on the sidelines where he absolutely threaded the needle. That was also a spectacular catch. I thought that was huge. Rushing the ball in the trenches, this TCU team absolutely dominated North Carolina because, again, North Carolina just doesn't have the talent. It doesn't matter who's on the sidelines. They did not have the talent in this game to win. When you look at 258 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, absolutely dominated them in the trenches. The offensive line was absolutely ridiculous. Kevarion Barnes had a phenomenal game, 113 yards on 11 carries with a touchdown. He had the 75-yard touchdown. Jordan Dyer as well, phenomenal game, 9 receptions, 136 yards, and a touchdown. Like, again, they did not have the talent in North Carolina to win this game at any point. Was I a little worried the first drive? Yeah, when North Carolina put it in right away. But after that, TCU absolutely closed down on both sides of the ball. They could not get anything going, North Carolina, in the passing game. When we look at 4 completions for Gio Lopez, 469 yards, absolutely ridiculous there. Then Max Johnson came in. He looked really good. A lot of people were saying, why was Max Johnson not the starter week 1 in this game after he came in and did really well, did more than Gio Lopez did the whole entire game in that touchdown drive. Again, I would take that with a grain of salt. And the reason why Max Johnson was not the starter, because Max Johnson, first of all, his injury was one of the most gruesome injuries in all of sports last year. That's a main reason why he was not the week 1 starter. Another reason why I believe he wasn't the week 1 starter, because Bill Belichick got Gio Lopez from the transfer portal as his guy. Max Johnson was a guy that was a player from last year coming in off a gruesome injury. He wasn't Bill Belichick's guy. Gio Lopez was. Again, it's going to be interesting where they go from in week 2. In my opinion, I still think Gio Lopez is going to be a starter. I don't think they're going to turn away from him that early. But Max Johnson, again, he came in. He did really well, but I would take it with a grain of salt. The game was basically over. This TCU team was prepped for Gio Lopez, so I don't really think you should really take what Mac Johnson did in consideration. Now, the real issue is, like I said, North Carolina doesn't have the talent, obviously, and they got the breaks blown off of them against an above-average TCU team, but again, not a team that we were looking at to be in the college football playoffs, a college football playoff contender. So for them to get absolutely blown out in this matchup, how is the rest of the season going to look for them? I am very worried for them with the turnover they had. Again, Bill Belichick had a short amount of time with all the players they got to get them really in sync, and they looked like, again, probably the most out of sync Power 4 team in all of football, and it was on the biggest stage. Bill Belichick, again, was set up to fail. And for Bill Belichick, in my opinion, I have said it in another podcast, like, what are you doing? It reminds me of like a great player staying around for too long where they'll just watch. Bill Belichick, kind of the same thing. Like, you were at the top of the NFL world. You had so many, Super Bowls, great runs, even as the Giants coordinator as well. Like, now you're staying and coaching a ACC team that doesn't have the talent. Like, why don't you just ride the high road and just get out of here? Like, again, by the time North Carolina ever turns this thing around, I don't think Bill Belichick is still going to be coaching again. You're looking at like a 3-year window with Bill Belichick at his age. And I just don't know why he was doing this. Like, again, does he have the itch to get into football again? Yeah, maybe. But, like, again, this North Carolina team doesn't have the talent. And I think it could be a very, very bad year for North Carolina if they're getting the breaks blown off of them by 30-plus points against TCU. That's like an above-average college football team. Like, this is going to be bad. This is going to be bad for sure. And I do not think they could turn it around. I wasn't high on this team this year. I wasn't high on this team in this game. And exactly what I expected to happen happened in this game. So, again, that wraps up our week 1 storylines for college football. Drop down below in the comment section below what you really think about this week 1. Were you right about the games? Were you wrong? Give me your takes. Or did you completely flip a take? Or again, are you standing on your takes as well? That wraps up this episode of Sloppy Saturdays. And